Not too many years ago, at a conference like this, my guess is that many of you would feel that the only social responsibility of a business would be to increase its profits. Climate change, social justice, that's the government's job, right? But things have certainly changed. That change doesn't just happen. We need courageous people to show us the way. We need pioneers. In 1993, Prince Charles invited Dame Polly Cortes to set up his business and sustainability program. And that program is now one of the flagship programs at the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, led by Dame Polly. She's been working on these issues for 30 years now, and in 2016 she was made a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire for services to sustainability leadership. Today we'll hear more about sustainability as a driver for business development. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dame Polly Cortes.
Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be with you here today at the Norwegian Annual Finance Day. And you won't be surprised to know that the last thing I want to talk about is Brexit. But I am particularly pleased to be here today because I believe that the finance sector has an enormous potential to contribute to a sustainable economy. And because each and every one of you in this room has the opportunity and the ability to make a real difference in achieving that goal. As you heard, I'm the director of an institute at the University of Cambridge, whose mission is to develop leadership and solutions for a sustainable economy. And we do this through graduate and executive education, through research, and through convening leadership groups, bringing companies together to try and develop solutions to problems that they cannot solve on their own. And as you also heard, the Institute is celebrating this year its 30th anniversary. And 25 years ago, we were commissioned by His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, to set up an executive program for very senior business leaders to help them to understand the social and environmental challenges that we face and to make better decisions as a result. In other words, to help them find a convergence between profitability and sustainability. The Prince of Wales' Business and Sustainability Programme now runs senior executive programmes all around the world and has become a global benchmark for sustainability leadership education, with nearly 4,000 alumni from over 1,500 organisations. And I'm delighted to say that we've had many delegates and faculty members from Norway, with Norsk Hydro being one of the earliest supporters of the programme, and your own Ida Kreutzer, a regular and brilliant contributor to our programmes. We now run a wealth of other capacity building programs in sustainability, from highly tailored board level interventions right through to online programs which reach thousands of present and future leaders all around the world. And the sustainability agenda has, of course, changed over those 25 years. And the options and solutions available to us continue to evolve at an extraordinary pace. But the hallmark of all our programs has always been to locate business and the economy in the wider context of society and the environment, and within the limits of the biosphere that supports us all. I don't need to remind you that as a species, we are in deep trouble in a number of areas if we continue as we are. Economic growth has delivered immeasurable benefits to people in the last 100 years or so. But its linear nature, that take, make, waste model, has a ferocious capacity to erode the human and the natural capital upon which our economies depend. We know that we have set in train a potentially existential threat in the form of climate change, and that catastrophic consequences for humans and nature await us if we fail to limit temperature increases to below 1.5 degrees. And it's entirely down to us. It's within our capability to do what needs to be done. The only question is, will we? But I'm not here to offer a doom and gloom story. That's almost too easy. I think it's equally important to remind ourselves just what amazing things have been achieved and can be achieved in the face of such threats by acts of leadership and courage and determination. 2015, for example, gave us the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and Finance for Development, uniting the world around solutions that offer us a better future. In that same year, my institute published our 10-year plan for rewiring the economy. It starts from the principle that the economy can and should be delivering the outcomes demanded by the Sustainable Development Goals, and proposes 10 interconnected universal tasks for business, government, and finance to secure a world in which 9 billion or more people can thrive on this planet. And it argues that in order to do so, those three sectors are going to have to offer greater leadership, and they're going to have to work together to collaborate more closely and more creatively to achieve the change we need. It is, of course, governments that must set the rules of an economy, providing the signals and conditions, the regulation and fiscal policy necessary to adjust economic behavior in the face of in favor of a more sustainable economy. We need them to set bold targets for social and environmental progress and new measures to track how well the economy is delivering them. Governments need to support more sustainable business models and use every opportunity to create drivers and incentives for innovation to drive social and environmental good, as well as financial returns. But the engine of that economic activity is, of course, business. And without business, very little progress can be made. That might seem obvious now, but I can remember back in 1994 when the Business and Sustainability Programme was just getting started, just how different the debate was in those days. The view of business then, by and large, was that concerns around climate change, human rights, political instability, and what was happening to our forests, our soil, our water and biodiversity was simply not a business agenda item. So the corporate sector was really caught unawares in the 1990s by the rapid rise in global awareness and civil society outrage at what was being done in the name of capitalism, and was ill-prepared to respond to demands for new and wider accountability. I think this was largely because until then it had adopted such a narrow view of its operating context. And I have to say that's a model that was reinforced by the business school teaching of the day. But during the 1990s and early 2000s, things began to change as leading companies saw the writing on the wall, that change was not only inevitable, but necessary, and could even provide some real opportunities. I remember in 2005 when the then Prime Minister, Tony Blair, complained that although government wanted to take urgent action on climate change, the business community wasn't behind him. That was at the time when the Confederation of British Industry was arguing that such action would be anti-competitive and anti-business. But we were able to take 10 chief executives from leading UK companies that we had been working with over the previous 10 years or so to see the Prime Minister, to offer him their support if the government were to take action. But in return, they made it absolutely clear that they needed science-based long-term policies that they could respond to with certainty. That meeting with the Prime Minister led to the creation of the Prince of Wales's Corporate Leaders Group on Climate Change, which went on to play an important role in supporting the UK government in delivering the world's first Climate Change Act. The group still today works in the United Kingdom and in the EU, calling for ambitious targets, regulations and frameworks that will enable business to play their part in the 2050 net zero journey. I think this group symbolises just how far business has come in a few short years. But I think it also highlights just how important it is to give business leaders the insight, the evidence, the narrative and the confidence to articulate an ambitious position for business, which is what our educational programmes set out to do. And as an aside, I wish I could say that business schools today are offering the same level of capacity building in relation to climate change and sustainability. But apart from a few notable exceptions, this simply isn't the case. So if government steers the economy and business is the engine, then finance is the fuel. And that's where, of course, where you come in. A decade ago, the finance sector was poorly represented in our educational portfolio, and we struggled to get senior executives to engage in the discussion, let alone take time out to attend an educational program. Interestingly, today, the finance sector is by far the largest percentage of our client base, and we have major custom education programs for financial regulators, for institutional investors, for insurers and banks. And we now also work long-term with over 50 financial institutions from across 5 continents, running leadership groups in insurance, in banking and investment to explore how we can create a finance system that incentivizes and rewards long-term thinking. Last month, we published the Climate-Wise Transition Risk Framework, developed by 25 leading insurance companies and focusing on embedding resilience in environmental risk in routine financial decisions. And at the same time, we published our new Cambridge Impact Framework, developed with and for our investment leaders group, to offer a data-driven dashboard that helps investors that make decisions that will achieve positive impact against the Sustainable Development Goals. Those 2 publications had the highest ever download rate of any of our work in sustainable finance, nearly 1,000 in under a week. So we know there is a lot of interest out there. In fact, the speed of change that we're seeing in the finance sector is quite extraordinary, faster than in any other sector that we work with, signaling that sustainability is now a highly commercially relevant and competitive issue for leading financial institutions. And I was greatly impressed to see the roadmap for green competitiveness in the finance sector published by Finance Norway, and genuinely inspired by the vision for the financial sector of 2030 to be profitable and sustainable. I was equally struck by the commitment to increase climate competence and capacity in the sector, to build understanding about how climate will affect the economy. And in a world where capital is still flowing in abundance towards unsustainable economic activity, initiatives like this are significant and potentially transformational and need all the support and recognition that they can get. We will not make the progress that we need to make without that level of ambition and without radical transformation in the way business, governments, and financial institutions work together to achieve the transition to a low-carbon future. I'd like to conclude with just a few thoughts about the role of higher education institutions in responding to sustainability challenges. Our leading academic communities are daily enhancing our knowledge and understanding of our impact on the planet, throwing ever-increasing light on the limits of the biosphere to support our demands and the likelihood and impact of 1.5 or 2 degrees of warming. Decades of research have given us a rich evidence base, greater certainty about the risks, and a whole raft of solutions that could be deployed. But I've seen at first hand that there is still a long way to go in building the kind of multi- and transdisciplinary research that we need for scientific technological advances to find their way into the strategic thinking and current practice of current leaders. That is something that needs to be addressed if we're going to make rapid change. And I'm hoping that our new Centre for Sustainable Finance will address this through a blend of research, engagement, and education. And finally, the question is, are we educating our brightest young people in ways that will enable them to lead their future? Sometimes it seems to me we are training students to know more and more about less and less. That's perhaps a little unfair, but it's true to say that a postdoctoral student can leave university with a world-leading understanding of the DNA of the mosquito, all the workings of quantum computers, but have very little understanding of our depleting resources, of the human and environmental consequences of our unsustainable economy, and of the climate crisis that we now face. We need to ensure that when we send students out into the world, they are not only good at analysis, but also good at synthesis, and that they have sufficient understanding about how both Earth systems and social systems work and how they interact. We know that young people are increasingly making their voices heard in schools and universities around the world, demanding action on issues that will have a profound impact on their future. The challenge to us as educators is that if it is the system that needs changing, then our students need to understand systems thinking. And they need to leave our universities much more aware than they often are about what is really going on in the world. I will leave the last word to someone who epitomizes the voice of future generations, who tells it like it is and puts a huge moral pressure on all of us to take the necessary action. Here is Greta Thunberg, the by now internationally famous 15-year-old schoolgirl, challenging leaders at Davos. She says, "We all have a choice. We can create transformational action that will safeguard the living conditions for future generations. Or we can continue with our business as usual and fail. Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope. But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act." I hope that message will stay with you for the rest of today and far beyond. Thank you very much.